Okay, so today we're going to talk about countries. Actually, a quiz that I have developed. You can choose a continent, and from each continent you can see letters potentially A to Z, and you can pick a country. Now, organizing that data into several tables, but the tables then turn into one query. Here's an example of what the query might look like, where we have email addresses. These are, of course, fictitious names. And so someone like Michelle Henderson was looking at Afghanistan but guessed it was Bangladesh. That happens to be choice K from the continent of AS or Asia. If we look further, we'll see that there are other A's or D's. As an example, we have D is in Morocco for Africa, but when we move on to Germany, that's a choice that's in Europe, and it's also choice D. And we can see Greenland is choice D in North America. So we just have to keep that in mind, that when they choose, they're not just choosing choice D, they're choosing it based on which continent they're looking at. So how are we going to normalize this data? Let's take a look at it. We got from ID, email, FName, LName, country, the whole bit all the way down to region. A fairly simplistic way of organizing it is to say, well, we got our users, and we got our guesses, and we got our correct answers. And that's not a bad start, actually. It's not 100% accurate, but it's better than some of the things that I've seen here. So let's take a look a little closer to see why this isn't 100% accurate. Well, for one, I mentioned that you can't just give an answer like D. You have to have a continent code. So email from the world users can link to the email, the guesses, world guesses, but that answer of D depends on which continent you're looking at. So one way of doing that would be to have two links between world guesses and world answers. World answers, of course, being the correct answer. However, that's not even fully right. One of the things that we can do is actually, instead of having it two, have it be one, where you're linking the ID from world answers to a new field called answer ID in the world guesses. That way, you know, if it's answer number, if under the world answers, ID might be 17, of which country may be Greenland and answer being D, but it's the continent, and of course whether it's continent ID or the continent code will all depend, because in fact world continents should be a fourth table, because the continent code told us NA was North America and EU was Europe and AF was Africa. So we needed to be able to separate that out, because region is actually dependent on the continent code. So this would be an example of a correct answer. There are, of course, other variations of that correct answer. One being that I could have had, instead of linking email from the world users to the world guesses, I could have linked ID from the world users to world guesses, where it calls it, as an example, user's ID or user ID. There are some advantages to doing that. For instance, if a world user wanted to change their email address, they'd be able to do that without impacting anything they've done in the past. So there's a couple of possible right answers for this assignment. Let's look at some wrong answers. Without getting too deep into them, we have the individuals, the answer, and the region here. But look, they've compared country guess, which is a character 25, they've got it linked to ID, which is an integer. Does that make any sense at all? I don't think so. And of course, they don't have an ID field in several of their tables. This is the example. It isn't too bad, but it's not right. But again, one of the things I just wanted to focus on was that in the world country data, you've got the country, you've got the country code, so we can know D is in North America, NA, but the region, North America, is dependent. Once I said a country code of NA, you knew the region was North America, and that's why you have to separate out region and continent code. Now, sometimes I just shake my head and wonder, okay, so you've got the world table that includes country and the continent and the region, but also student ID. Why would a list of countries contain a student ID? Which, when linked to the country table, you have a country character, it, I don't even know where to begin. I guess what they really meant was world was supposed to be the guesses. I really just don't know what they're trying to do here. Now, here's a classic, world names and world info. Why world info would have fname and email when world names has fname and lname and country? I'm not even sure, but think about that link, fname to fname. What if two students had the same first name? It would cause a huge mess in trying to create a query. Now here's a link that has email to country guess. Does that even make any sense? The email be something like fyunker at fmcc.suna.edu, and a country guess would be something like D or A. They'd never be the same. You would get no data at all. It'd be impossible to have data. And see, that's the thing that the world users, the world guesses, and the world answers, that's not bad, except, of course, each continent could have an A and a B and a C and a D. So you can't just say they chose an answer of A. You have to say they chose an answer of A for a particular continent. Okay, next. Either a guess or an answer could be tied to a name, but not both. I don't even know why we would. L-name is not a unique identifier. Why would you link L-name to L-name? You know, we have multiple people named Smith. Even if you were going to link names, which you shouldn't, you should do ID, because you could have two John Smiths, but you don't even have first name linked in addition to L-name. And then sometimes I just say, what were you thinking? F-name, L-name, and email is in the world user table. That's fine. But it's also in the world info table. In fact, the only thing different is an ID field, which you should have in both. So I'm sitting there saying, why do you have these? Why would you have two tables that are essentially identical? Does it make any sense? I don't know. So now we have the world personal information, which contains their email and their answer, which again is fine except for the fact it doesn't have the country code with it. But then the answer is just a letter. And that would create a one-to-one relationship, answer to answer, A to A, B to B. But we know that each person is going to have multiple choices for A because there are multiple continents. Clearly, not going to work. Now, in this one, I'm looking, student ID is the same as country guess ID. Why would you do that? And country guess is equal to the answer? That could be. Except that you have in the country guess table, you have a country guess field. And the countries table, you have a country guess field. I would have thought they would have been linked, not linked to answer. But regardless, then you have ID and answer linked. I don't know why. Sometimes I scratch my head. I used to pull my hair out, but I don't have enough anymore. So in this one, world guess has email, F-name, L-name, country guess, and country, which means that each person would get one country guess and one country. But when you chose A, didn't we already know what country you were choosing? I don't know.